It's finally time for a full sketchbook tour. I'll be showing everything, the finished pages, the doodles, the experiments, and even the messy ones. Along the way, I'll talk about my favorite materials, the thought process while drawing, and how I ended up with the style I use today. So before I show you my actual sketchbooks, let's rewind to when I first started creating portraits. Back then, I didn't have a proper sketchbook. I mostly drew on A4 and A5 sheets, just regular bond paper and vellum I used back in high school. I also had this clear book where I compiled my drawings starting from 2019. Though most of them are from 2020 when the pandemic hit. I vaguely remember owning a sketchbook, but it was mostly for academic stuff. I think I used it when I was a cartoonist for journalism, but I honestly have no idea where it is now. So we'll just start with a stack of loose papers instead. I've got another clear book here. This one covers 2021 to 2022. These were the years I started feeling burnt out and went on a lot of hiatus. These sketches are from 2018. That was the time I was doodling and sketching constantly. It was around 9th grade when I actually started getting seriously into doing portraits. I also started doing commissions around the time. The prices were super cheap since I just wanted to try it out. That's how I finally bought my first colored pencils. Around this phase, I already had a little knowledge about blending colors. Back in elementary through junior high, I mostly did poster drawings using oil pastels since that was the main medium allowed in art competitions. These portraits were from summer 2019. I was still doing commissions and all that. I actually had even more fan art from that period, but I remember giving a lot of them to my classmates and schoolmates because they really liked them. I finally got my first Prismacolor set, and this was my first time using it. I thought pink would work, but there was actually a goldenrod and some light peach in the set. I was still figuring it all out. There was this artist group on Facebook called kpopfanart. The art community was super chill at the time, and that's actually where I learned new drawing techniques, how to use Prismacolor, and even the whole commission thing, like how to price your work properly. I saw so many amazing artists there, and most of them were doing traditional photorealism. That kind of art was basically the top trend back then. I was one of those influenced by the community, and I basically jumped straight into realism without really learning the foundation first, like perspective, anatomy, and other essential art studies. So 2020 came and I was still super eager to develop new drawing skills, especially in photorealism, and also to attract more clients. This was my progress from my very first portrait in January to my last one in December. The difference is insane. I still can't believe it all happened within 12 months of drawing almost every single day. It was also the start of the pandemic, which actually gave me more time to focus. I remember waking up super early because I was so excited to finish my drawings. My hands were literally itching to hold a pencil. There was also this Filipino artist I looked up to back then. He's not posting his art anymore, basically disappeared online, but he really inspired me to just draw more and not overthink things. I started drawing a ton of portraits every day. I set a goal for like 2-3 per day. I even gave myself 4 hours per portrait. I was just doing it for fun, and it felt so exciting and satisfying. I posted this portrait online and started gaining recognition. I connected with a bunch more artists through that, and I felt thrilled as I slowly started getting recognized by my favorite artists and idols. And honestly, that's when the pressure started creeping in. Suddenly, it felt like it was becoming something much bigger. I was totally overwhelmed. When I drew this Blackpink series during their comeback, mostly because a lot were suggesting it got even more attention. That's also when my mom really started seeing my potential. Though honestly, she's been my number one supporter since I was like 3 years old. When she first noticed I leaned toward the creative side. Around this time, people started suggesting I start a YouTube channel, and my mom encouraged me to do it too. I was super anxious about it, but I also saw it as a chance to share my art with more people and maybe earn a bit. That year was really tough for us. I was still taking commissions on the side, and I also learned so much about the art world, all while keeping up with school. I really liked how our eyes turned out here. This was also my first time using a varnish on paper. I didn't realize it was meant only for acrylic and oil paintings, so the part in the nose ended up peeling off since I stored it while it was still wet. I learned that fixatives are what you're actually supposed to use for dry media in drawings. Here was my first trial. I didn't like it because the features felt a bit off. Though I liked the blending, I decided to redo it, and this second version came out much better. I skipped the gray tones here, which made it more vibrant and close to its actual features. You can also see my progress over the months. I also started using the grid method properly to make the proportions more accurate. This was the first portrait I did in January. I also tried spraying a fixative for the first time. I was honestly scared at first, but it worked really well. It's definitely something I'd recommend if you really want to preserve your artwork. That year was also when I slowly started to feel burnt out. I wasn't creating as much because I was focusing more on making higher quality portraits instead of just producing a lot. I poured so much effort into the details. Around the time, commissions were coming in one after another, so I barely had time to make fan arts. Whenever I did, it was mostly just for my YouTube channel so I could share the process. One of my absolute favorite from this period is my portrait of Taeyong. It took me around 4 days to finish. Back then, I couldn't fully appreciate my own work. My perfectionist side was starting to surface. I noticed every little detail, even things no one else would point out. But now looking back, I'm honestly amazed. Like, did I really make this? The details in person are so sharp. At the time though, I was very self-critical and had really low self-esteem. My sister was actually the one promoting my art. Whenever I posted something, I wouldn't even check back. I just leave it, which is also why I sometimes didn't reply to comments. By 2022, the burnout hit harder. I felt like everything was repetitive, like there was nothing new. It's as if I was losing my creativity because I was just copying references as they were, especially with commissions. Most of them were huge pieces, like around 22 by 28 inches, which meant sleepless nights and back-to-back deadlines. I ended up taking a lot of breaks from my account. At one point, my Instagram even got hacked, which forced me into an even longer hiatus. During that time, I was still working silently on commissions, but my mental and physical health started to deteriorate. It was also around then that I started keeping a sketchbook. I wanted to explore different styles and mediums, hoping to feel that spark for drawing again. I was still making portraits around this time, but honestly, I was already starting to lose interest. Still, my family was really supportive of everything I was doing. My dad would even watch my YouTube videos over and over. I used to cringe whenever I heard my own videos. Honestly, I still do, but I really appreciated their support. I think this was actually my last colored pencil tutorial. The pencils I used were broad thinner, which aren't really high quality or light fast. You can even see in this other portrait that some areas have already faded. I didn't spray a fixative back then. Maybe if I had, the colors would have held up better. I realized I had never really sketched or doodled in my free time, so I finally gave it a try, and honestly it was so fun. Drawing outside of work felt refreshing. This sketchbook also doubled as a journal, so it's filled with a lot of writing too. This was one of my sketchbooks from early 2023. I bought it online for super cheap. I wasn't very consistent with it since I had other sketchbooks at the time and kept switching around. Most of my pages here are just studies, which is why I never posted them. They were messy and a lot of them were practice copies from other artists' works, so I just kept them to myself. I also had a lot of loose papers for commissions, so I used the extra for random art. And some of these sketches were actually torn out from the sketchbook earlier, but again, they were mostly just studies. This one is a handmade sketchbook I got as a gift from America. At the first page, I honestly can't remember if my reference was from a photo or another artwork. Around the time, I had just bought gouache and wanted to test it out here. It was difficult, but I learned some useful blending techniques. On the next spread, I drew random faces using Pinterest references. This one was when Ohu sent me their markers. It was my first ever brand collab, which I used the sketchbook to practice with. I think this was also around the time the One Piece live action came out. Out of all these pages, this one is probably my favorite. I really like the choice of colors and the lighting. I skipped a lot of pages in the sketchbook, and even now there are still blank ones. I didn't force myself to finish it since that wasn't really the point. Back then, I wasn't taking the sketchbook too seriously, and I even tore up pages whenever I didn't like how they turned out. This was the period when I started taking things a bit more seriously, but it was still very study focused. I really wanted to find a style that felt comfortable for me, so I kept learning from different artists. Like this one, I studied Sol Rojo's techniques and learned about complementary colors and her approach to coloring. I also came across additional artists online whose coloring style I liked, so I tried applying it with alcohol markers. sketchpad actually started in 2023. It's dedicated to alcohol markers. One of the first pieces I made was around mid 2023. I liked how full it looked since I didn't leave any empty space. It was also my very first try with alcohol markers. I later made a second one because the first ended up a little too dark, so I tried going lighter. I also filmed a YouTube video for this. I used markers, which I really enjoyed working with. Around the time the One Piece live action came out, I did another artwork where I layered the skin tones a lot. The paper held up surprisingly well. Back then, I was mostly using Fabriano Bristol since I didn't own the sketchpad yet. I only pasted those works into this pad later on because I wanted everything compiled together. I also did a fan art of 1989 Taylor's version. For that one, I limited my colors because I didn't want to get overwhelmed, and it actually turned out really nice. This is my Batali fan art. I ended up filling every corner again. I think I just love cramming in geometric shapes everywhere. I really like the colors too here. I probably used 4 or 5 colors for this one. Around this time, I also started experimenting with bolder line art and thicker borders, and it honestly made the whole piece pop so much more. This one was definitely my favorite back then. I loved how the lines felt structured but still a little flowy. Plus, I was super obsessed with this color palette. I think this was around the time I had a major art block, but I just got a glitter pen, so I decided to play around with it. Then there's my one young fan art. I was experimenting with mixing stylized art and realism, but it ended up leaning more toward semi-realism. I used Artex colored pencils for this, and since they're not light fast or super high quality, the colors kind of faded over time. This one was also my first try using an acrylic marker. It felt so different from alcohol markers. With acrylics, I realized I needed to simplify colors more, kind of like how anime or cartoons do it, so that was a big adjustment for me. I started this one last year and yeah, I still haven't finished it. This sketchbook is a Peter Popper press. On the very first page, I pasted in some gouache practices. This is another one I started last year and again not finished. I'm slow, okay? I'm always so amazed by artists who finish a whole sketchbook in like a month. It's actually insane. Anyway, this one's mostly sketch studies, anatomy, and random doodles. This is not really a sketchbook, just some marker pads. There's only a few drawings left here since I usually tear out the pages and paste them into my main sketchbook. The paper quality is actually super good for alcohol markers. That's why I like practicing here first, so my main sketchbook doesn't bleed through. This one I use just for pure practice and doodles. Sometimes I'll break down other artists' works and study little parts here. It's kind of my scratchpad sketchbook.